Remember this part? Oh, yes, that was a special day.
The story begins with a single photograph, an old, time-worn picture that sat on my grandmother's bedside table for as long as I can remember. The frame was cracked at the corner, the glass slightly fogged, and the edges of the picture had yellowed with age, but she kept it polished as if it were the most precious thing she owned. The man in the photograph had a distant, unreadable expression, the kind you couldn't quite interpret, half sad, half stern, as if he carried a secret too heavy to speak. Growing up, I must have asked her 100 times who he was, but every attempt ended the same way, her eyes darkening, her lips tightening, and a firm, unsettling, "Don't ask about him." It was the only topic that turned her gentle warmth into immediate fear. Back then, I thought she was just being dramatic or overly protective of her past, but now I understand the fear in her voice was real, dangerously real. Last week, everything changed. My grandmother passed away quietly in her sleep, and in her final hours, she gripped my hand with a desperation I had never seen in her, staring past me as if she saw someone standing in the doorway. She kept looking toward the photograph, whispering a name so faint I almost thought I imagined it. The room felt colder, almost suffocating, and then she pulled me close with a strength that didn't match her frail body and said, "Don't let him find you. Promise me." I didn't understand who she meant, but the terror in her voice didn't feel metaphorical. It felt like a warning carried across decades. Her passing left a silence in the house that felt wrong, as if something unfinished was still lingering. After the funeral, I returned to pack her belongings, and that's when I remembered the promise she had made me swear to uphold. For years, she had a small drawer built into her bedside table, locked, old-fashioned, almost never touched. I'd seen it, wondered about it, even tried opening it as a child, but it never budged. The night before she passed, she made me promise not to open that drawer until she was gone. Her voice at that moment wasn't strict. It was terrified, pleading, like the contents inside were both a confession and a threat. As I sat alone in her dimly lit bedroom, surrounded by the faint scent of lavender and old wood, I pulled the key she had placed in my hand on her final night. It was cold, heavier than I expected, as if it carried the weight of everything she never said. The photograph, still on her nightstand, seemed to watch me. The man's eyes felt different now, closer, more present. My heart pounded as I placed the key into the lock, hearing the soft metallic click that broke a silence stretching across generations. I opened the drawer expecting answers, but what I found only created more questions. A stack of letters tied with fraying ribbon, a rusted key of a different shape, a newspaper clipping about a missing soldier, and a sealed envelope with my name written in shaky handwriting. Until that moment, I had no idea that the man in the photograph wasn't just a forgotten memory or an untold story from her youth. He was the reason she lived in fear, the shadow that followed her through time, and the secret she worked her whole life to bury. And now, because she left these things for me, that secret was no longer hers to carry. It was mine. The house felt different the moment I stepped inside after the funeral, quieter, heavier, as if whatever my grandmother had been keeping at bay finally had room to breathe. Dust danced in the sunlight that streamed through the curtains, settling on the familiar trinkets and knickknacks she loved. Her room, always smelling faintly of lavender and old books, was exactly as she left it, neatly arranged, perfectly maintained, and yet somehow uneasy. It wasn't grief alone that twisted my stomach. It was the memory of how she looked at me in her final moments, the terror in her voice when she whispered, "Don't let him find you." I had tried to dismiss it as confusion, the rambling of a fading mind, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. My grandmother was many things, but confused wasn't one of them. The first thing my eyes landed on was the photograph, his photograph. The man with the unreadable expression, forever frozen in a moment that predated my existence. As a child, I always thought he had a kind face, even though something about his eyes unsettled me. Now, standing alone in the silent room, those same eyes felt sharper, watching, following. It was absurd, of course, just a picture, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the air around it had grown colder. I approached the picture slowly, almost involuntarily, drawn to it the way one is drawn toward a cliff's edge. The frame was cold to the touch, colder than the rest of the room. My grandmother must have cleaned it often. There wasn't a speck of dust on it. I traced the faded edges with my thumb, trying to study the man's face, as if the answer my grandmother never gave me would suddenly present itself. Who was he really? Why didn't she ever talk about him? Why was he the only thing in this house she guarded with fear instead of love? My gaze drifted to the small drawer built into her bedside table, the one that had always been locked, the one she made me swear not to open until she was gone. Her voice echoed in my mind again, faint but powerful. Don't let him find you. Promise me. What kind of secret needed protection even after death? Did she fear this man, or what he represented? I sat down on her bed, the springs creaking under my weight. The whole room seemed to hold its breath. Pulling the small, cold key from my pocket, I turned it over in my hand. It was old, probably older than me, maybe older than her. The metal was worn smooth, the handle shaped like an intricate pattern I couldn't immediately place. It didn't look like it belonged to the drawer. It looked like it belonged to something older, ancient even. But I knew this key, the one she pressed into my palm the night before she died, was meant for the drawer. She didn't say the words, but her eyes made it clear. Whatever she had been hiding, I had to see it. Not when she was alive, when she was gone. As if she feared the knowledge itself would harm me, or that someone or something would react to me knowing. I stood, walked slowly to the drawer, and knelt beside it. The key slid in smoothly, almost too smoothly for how old it looked. For a moment, I hesitated, staring at the photograph on the nightstand again. His face, his expression, somehow it looked different now, closer, as if he was anticipating what I was about to find. The house creaked, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I turned the key. The drawer opened with a slow, reluctant groan, as if it hadn't been touched in decades. A stale, trapped smell drifted out. Old paper, wood, and something metallic like rusted iron. For a moment, I didn't move. I just stared into the narrow darkness inside, waiting for some feeling, some instinct to guide me. The room felt colder now, the light dimmer, as if the house itself knew something forbidden was about to be uncovered. Inside the drawer lay a carefully arranged set of items, a stack of letters tied with a fraying ribbon, a newspaper clipping folded crisply despite its age, a tarnished silver locket, and a second key, smaller, older, and shaped unlike any modern lock I'd ever seen. Beneath all of it was a thick sealed envelope with my name written in my grandmother's trembling handwriting. Seeing my name there, it hit me harder than I expected. She had planned this. Every moment of silence, every warning, every locked drawer. This wasn't accidental. It was deliberate. And whatever she had been hiding wasn't just part of her past. Somehow, it was meant for me. My hands trembled slightly as I took out the letters first. The ribbon snapped easily, brittle with age. The first letter was dated 1959, written in a neat cursive script. But what made my breath catch was the name signed at the bottom, Jonathan Hale. The same name etched faintly into the back of the photograph. So the man did have a name, Jonathan. But that meant these letters were from him to her. I unfolded the letter carefully. "My dearest Evelyn," it began. My grandmother's name. Already my heartbeat quickened. The letter spoke of longing, of separation, of promises made in the shadows of something unspoken. But it wasn't romantic in a sweet, youthful way. It felt desperate, like someone running out of time. He mentioned the house, the watchers, and something he called the agreement. And in one chilling line, he wrote, "If they find me again, I cannot return. You must do everything to protect the boy." Protect the boy? Who? My father? Someone else? Or me? But the dates didn't add up. This was decades before I was born. Unless the boy meant something else. I pulled out another letter, this one darker, the ink smudged as if written in a frantic rush. Evelyn, they know. I felt their presence outside the window last night. Don't let them near the child. Lock the door. Burn the photograph if you must. I'll try to reach you before sunrise. I stopped reading. My stomach twisted. Burn the photograph? She never burned it. She kept it by her bed all these years. Why? The house creaked sharply, snapping me out of my trance. For a moment, I thought I heard something faint in the hallway, like footsteps shifting weight, slow, careful, the kind that didn't want to be heard. I froze and listened. Silence. But the silence didn't feel empty. It felt aware. Shaking the chill off my spine, I reached for the newspaper clipping. It was from 1960, titled, "Local Soldier Declared Missing, Presumed Dead." And there he was, Jonathan, the same photograph, the same unreadable eyes. But the date of this appearance, it didn't match the last letter's date. According to the letter, he was alive after the newspaper declared him dead. So either he survived and hid, or someone wanted the world to believe he was dead. I reached finally for the small silver locket. It clicked open easily. Inside was a tiny portrait of my grandmother, young, smiling. And on the other side, I froze. A baby. Dark hair, bright eyes. The photograph was old, but something in the face, something around the eyes, felt familiar. Too familiar. My breath caught. It looked like me. A cold shiver ran through my entire body. Before I could think, a soft thump echoed from the hallway. Not the house settling, not pipes. This was deliberate, close. I stood up slowly, pulse hammering. The photograph on the nightstand seemed to glare at me under the dim light. And for the first time in my life, I felt like Jonathan Hale wasn't just part of my grandmother's past. He was part of my present. I stood completely still, staring at the doorway as the soft thump echoed into silence. For a long moment, I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. My grandmother's house had always been quiet, but this wasn't the kind of sound you could blame on old wood or settling floors. This was a deliberate shift of weight, like someone stepping just out of sight. I swallowed hard and forced myself to look away from the hallway. Every instant screamed at me to leave the drawer's contents alone, to lock everything back and pretend I hadn't opened it. But I couldn't, not anymore. The letters, the locket, the picture of the child who looked uncannily like me, they were pieces of a truth my grandmother hid her entire life. My heart hammered as I picked up the sealed envelope with my name on it. The paper felt fragile, soft at the edges. I slid my thumb under the flap and opened it carefully. Inside was a single sheet of paper, written in my grandmother's unmistakable handwriting, shaky, uneven, but still hers. "Daniel, my love," it began. The words sank into me like stones. "If you are reading this, it means I am gone, and the burden I carried must finally pass to you. I kept the truth from you because knowledge is a doorway, and once opened, it cannot be closed." My throat tightened. The man in the photograph is Jonathan Hale. He was not just a part of my past, he is a part of yours. What he was running from still exists, and it will come again. You must not show fear when it appears. If it knows you are afraid, it will not leave you. A cold wave washed over me. It will not leave you? What kind of warning was that? The letter continued. Do not trust the photograph. Do not meet its eyes in the dark. And whatever you do, Daniel, Do not answer when it calls your name. A chill shot down my spine so violently I almost dropped the paper. Don't answer when it calls your name? What the hell did that even mean? Suddenly, the air in the room felt heavier, pressing against my chest. I folded the letter with shaking hands and placed it on the bed, trying to steady my breathing. My grandmother had always been grounded, practical, the kind of woman who didn't believe in nonsense. If she wrote something like this, she must have been terrified. Terrified for me. I picked up the smaller, older key that had been lying beneath the letters. It was strange, blackened with age, the metal cool and almost oily to the touch. It didn't match anything in the house that I knew of. I turned it over and noticed faint symbols etched into it, circles intersecting with lines, almost geometric patterns. It didn't look like a house key. It looked like something ancient, something ancient. Before I could examine it further, another soft sound came from the hallway. This time closer, like fingers brushing against the wall, slowly, dragging. I stood up, frozen in place. "Hello?" I called out before I could stop myself. Silence. Deep, unnatural silence. My eyes drifted toward the photograph again. The man's expression, still unreadable, seemed sharper now, his eyes darker under the slant of afternoon light. I stepped closer, unable to shake the feeling that his gaze had shifted, tilted, focused. "What are you?" I whispered. The house creaked, not the usual soft groan, but a sudden sharp crack that sounded like someone stepping directly outside the bedroom door. I spun toward it, adrenaline flooding through me. The doorknob twitched. Just slightly, just enough to make the blood drain from my face. I didn't breathe, didn't blink. For 5 long seconds, the knob stayed still. Then, slowly, tap, tap, tap. 3 soft knocks. Not loud, not forceful, just patient, waiting. My grandmother's warning slammed into my mind. Do not answer when it calls your name. I backed away from the door, pulse roaring in my ears. Then, Daniel. A voice, soft, familiar, whispering through the crack in the door. My blood froze. It was my grandmother's voice. Daniel. My grandmother's voice seeped through the thin crack beneath the door, soft, trembling, and impossibly familiar. For a heartbeat, everything inside me froze. Every memory of her, her warmth, her gentleness, her lullabies, flashed through my mind. It sounded exactly like her. Exactly. But she was gone. I had watched her body being carried away. I had held her cold hand in those final hours, and the warning in her letter echoed like thunder in my skull. Do not answer when it calls your name. Whatever was outside that door wasn't her. I forced my breath to steady, my back pressed against the far wall of the bedroom. The air felt denser, colder, as if something unseen was filling the narrow hallway. "Daniel, please," the voice whimpered, cracking at the end, emotional, human. Too human. She used to call my name just like that when I was a child, when I had nightmares, when I couldn't sleep. And now, hearing it here, in the stale quiet of her empty house, felt wrong in a way I couldn't explain. I shook my head hard, reminding myself that familiar wasn't the same as safe. I didn't move, didn't speak. The voice softened, almost pleading. "Sweetheart, open the door. It's just me." A sick twist pulled at my stomach. My grandmother never called me sweetheart, not once in my entire life. That was the first mistake. The second mistake came with the next whisper. Too smooth, too controlled. "You don't have to be afraid. I only want to talk." My pulse kicked into overdrive. Whoever or whatever was out there was learning, mimicking, testing different tones, like it was trying to figure out which version of her would convince me. I took a careful step backward, my foot brushing against the bed frame. The tiny sound echoed louder than it should have. The hallway outside immediately went silent, completely silent. Then, a soft shuffle, like something adjusting its weight, listening. I clamped a hand over my mouth, feeling my heartbeat in my palm. The doorknob twitched again, slowly, steadily, until it turned just enough to click against the latch. Daniel. This time, the voice was wrong, glitching between tones, starting as hers, ending deeper, almost mechanical, like a recording slowing down. The temperature in the room dropped so sharply my breath fogged. My skin prickled with goosebumps. The house itself felt like it was exhaling, preparing for something. My eyes darted toward the drawer again, the letters from Jonathan, the old key, the warning. My grandmother hadn't been paranoid. She hadn't been confused. She'd been hunted. And now, so was I. I forced myself to move, inching toward the window. It was only a few feet away. If I could get out, even onto the small roof ledge, I could escape the room and circle back to the front door. Staying trapped here wasn't an option. But before I could reach the window, something pressed lightly, deliberately against the other side of the door. A palm. Flat, steady, waiting. The silhouette of fingers appeared beneath the door shadow gap, far too long to be human. I stumbled backward, my calf hitting the edge of the nightstand. The photograph wobbled and fell forward. Instinctively, I caught it. And that's when everything stopped. The figure outside the door went completely still. Not a sound, not a breath. As I lifted the photograph, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. A faint symbol carved into the wooden frame. The same pattern etched into the ancient key inside the drawer. A circle intersected by 3 lines. My grandmother hadn't kept the photograph because she loved the man in it. She kept it because it meant something. Something important. Something dangerous. Outside the door, the voice spoke again. Low, distorted, almost amused. "You found it, didn't you?" My blood ran cold. It wasn't trying to sound like her anymore. It didn't need to, because now it knew I wasn't fooled. Daddy's voice softened. "Some stories, Beta, do not stay buried. They wait, patiently." For the rest of the day, Daddy Ama stayed unusually quiet, murmuring prayers under her breath, lighting incense, and keeping the rusted key on the shelf, but never touching it with bare hands again. That night, as Lila lay in bed, she felt restless. The moonlight spilled into her room, casting long shadows across the wooden floor. Every creak of the old house felt louder. Every whisper of wind felt too close. Then she heard it. Tap, tap, tap. Someone or something was knocking on her window. Her body went cold. The knock came again, softer this time, like fingertips brushing the glass. Lila slowly sat up. Her breath trembled. "Dottie?" she whispered. No answer. Gathering her courage, she reached for the curtain and pulled it back. There was no one outside, only moonlit emptiness. But as she leaned closer, she noticed something on the window pane, something smudged as though drawn by a finger. A symbol that looked exactly like the markings on the rusted key. Her heartbeat thundered. She stumbled backward and rushed into Dottie Ama's room. "Dottie, Dottie," she whispered urgently. Dottie opened her eyes instantly, as if she hadn't been asleep at all. "You saw it, didn't you?" she asked calmly. Lila nodded, shaking. Dottie Ama sighed. "Beta, tomorrow we will go to the well." Lila swallowed hard. "Why?" Dottie looked at her with eyes heavy with old secrets. "Because the spirit that left that mark does not want to harm you. It wants to tell you something." The morning sun rose slowly, its golden rays stretching across the quiet village like a reluctant promise of warmth. Birds chirped somewhere beyond the trees, but even their songs sounded cautious, like they sensed something shifting in the air. Lila barely slept. The symbol on the window haunted her mind, replaying like a silent warning. As she stepped into the courtyard, Dottie Ama was already awake, sitting beside the incense burner, her shawl wrapped tightly around her shoulders. "You're ready?" she asked. Lila nodded, though her stomach felt heavy with dread. Dottie Ama picked up the cloth bundle holding the rusted key, still not touching it directly, and motioned for Lila to follow. They walked through narrow, winding paths, past fields still glistening with morning dew, until the old well finally came into view. The area around it felt colder than the rest of the village, as if the air itself held its breath. The well stood alone, its stones cracked with age, the rope frayed, the wooden bucket long gone. No one used it anymore. Children were warned to stay away. Adults avoided it without question. But today, Dottie and Lila stepped right up to it. Lila swallowed. "Dottie, what happened here? Why does this place feel different?" Dottie Ama rested her hand on the crumbling stone rim. "Because some places remember," she whispered, "even when people forget." She unwrapped the cloth and held up the rusted key. The symbols on it glimmered faintly in the sunlight, like they were waking up. "When I was young," Dottie began, her voice trembling of memories. "The well was not abandoned. It was the heart of the village. Women drew water, children played nearby. Life flowed through this place." She paused, her eyes distant. Then one night, a tragedy occurred. A young woman named Shazia disappeared. Some said she ran away. Others whispered darker stories. But her body was never found. Lila felt her skin prickle. What happened to her? "That is the question," Dottie replied, "that nobody wanted to answer." Lila leaned closer. "And the key? The symbol on my window?" Dottie turned the key slowly in her hand. This belonged to Shazia. It was said to open a small trunk she kept hidden, full of letters, secrets, and things she didn't want the world to see. "Did anyone ever find the trunk?" "No," Dottie said softly. "But the night she vanished, someone saw her walking toward the well." A chill ran through Lila. "So you think her spirit is coming back?" Dottie didn't answer. Instead, she walked around the well, her eyes scanning the stones. Lila followed silently until Dottie stopped and pointed. There, half hidden by moss, was the same symbol again. "The spirit is not angry," Dottie murmured. "It is trying to show us something." She slowly lowered the key toward the mark. As the metal touched the stone, a cold gust of wind whipped around them. Lila gasped. The ground trembled, just slightly, and somewhere deep inside the well, they heard a faint sound, a clang, like metal striking metal. Lila's breath caught. "Dottie, something is down there." Dottie nodded slowly, her expression grave. "It's calling us." Before they could move, another gust of wind surged up from the well, stronger this time, lifting dust and dry leaves into a swirling arc. Lila shielded her face, coughing. And then she heard it. A whisper. Soft. Faint. A woman's voice. Crying. Her heart hammered in her chest. She stepped back instinctively, grabbing Dottie's arm. "Dottie, we shouldn't be here." But Dottie stood perfectly still, eyes closed, listening. When the wind finally died down, she opened her eyes. "Beta, this is only the beginning." Lila felt the world tilt around her. "How do we find the truth?" she whispered. Dottie held up the rusted key once more. "We follow where she leads us." The wind had settled, but the air around the old well still felt unnaturally heavy, like the world was holding its breath, waiting for what came next. The faint metallic clang from deep inside echoed in Lila's mind long after it faded, its meaning clear. Something was down there. Dottie Ama's fingers tightened around a rusted key as she stepped closer to the rim of the well, peering into the depth where sunlight dissolved into nothingness. Lila stood beside her, her pulse fluttering, torn between fear and a strange sense of responsibility she didn't fully understand. "Dottie, are we really going down there?" Lila whispered. Dottie nodded slowly. "We must. Spirits do not call without purpose. And Shazia, she has waited long enough." Lila shivered, imagining the young woman whose life ended in silence and shadows. But another thought gripped her even tighter. Why Dottie? Why her family? Why now? Before she could ask, Dottie turned and gently touched her cheek. "You must be brave, Beta. Some truths hide in darkness only because no one dared to search." The wind had settled, but the air around the old well still felt unnaturally heavy, like the world was holding its breath, waiting for what came next. The faint metallic clang from deep inside lingered in Lila's mind long after it faded, its meaning clear. Something was down there.
With that, she picked up a coil of rope she had brought earlier, tying one end securely to a sturdy tree trunk near the well. The rope looked old but strong enough to carry at least one person. "Dottie, I'll go with you," Lila said, though her voice trembled. "No," Dottie shook her head firmly. "You will lower me, and you will listen for my voice. If anything happens, you must run. Not for help. No one will come here at night. You run back to the house and lock every door." The finality in her tone silenced all protest. With a deep breath, Dottie adjusted the rope around her waist. Lila braced herself at the edge, gripping tightly as Dottie began to descend, her feet finding stone footholds worn smooth with age. The rope slid slowly through Lila's hands. A few feet down, Dottie switched on a small flashlight. Its beam cut through the darkness like a thin blade, but it didn't reach the bottom. "Can you see anything?" Lila called. "Just stones so far," Dottie replied, her voice echoing softly. Lower and lower she went, the distance between them widening, until her voice became only a faint murmur beneath the earth. Then, "I'm close to something," Dottie shouted. "The ground here is uneven. Wait, Lila, stop lowering." The rope went taut in Lila's hands. "What is it?" There's wood here, and metal. Yes, something is buried against the inner wall of the well." Lila's breath caught. The trunk. Shazia's. She leaned over the edge, trying to see, but the darkness swallowed everything. "I'm touching it now," Dottie said. Her voice had changed, full of awe and sorrow. "It's real." A scraping sound echoed up the well. More scraping, then a muffled thud. "It's wedged tightly," Dottie called. "I'll try." Suddenly, her words cut off. "Dottie?" Lila's panic surged. "Dottie, are you okay?" Silence. Then, from deep below, a soft cry drifted upward. But it wasn't Dottie's voice. It was gentle, broken, a woman's sob. Lila froze, her blood running cold. "Shazia," Dottie whispered finally, her voice barely audible. "I feel her. She's here." The sobbing grew louder, swirling up the well like a rising mist, filling the air with sorrow, so palpable Lila felt it press against her chest. "Dottie, come back up," she cried. But Dottie didn't move. "She wants the truth to rise," Dottie murmured, just like her voice. There was a clank of metal, Dottie unlocking something. "I have it," she said, "the trunk. It's open." A sudden gust of wind shot upward, knocking dust into Lila's face. She stumbled back. Then, a scream. Short, sharp, cut clean off. "Dottie!" Lila lunged for the rope and pulled with all her strength, her hands burning, her breath ragged. After agonizing seconds, Dottie's form finally emerged from the darkness, clutching a small, ancient wooden trunk to her chest. Her face was pale, her eyes wide, not with fear, but with understanding. As Lila helped her out, Dottie collapsed onto the ground, still holding the trunk tightly. Lila knelt beside her, shaking. "What happened? What did you see?" Dottie looked up, and for the first time since this all began, Lila saw tears in her eyes. "Beta," she whispered, stroking the cracked lid of the trunk, "the truth your grandmother carried is darker than I ever imagined." The night after they pulled the trunk from the well, the house felt different, heavier, watchful, as if the walls themselves were waiting for the truth to finally be spoken aloud. Lila placed the ancient wooden trunk on the old dining table, its cracked lid trembling slightly every time she touched it. Dottie Amma sat beside her, exhausted and shaken, her hands still trembling from the encounter below the earth. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the faint rustling of the curtains as the wind slipped through the half-open window. Lila finally broke the silence. "Dottie, what did you see down there?" Instead of answering, Dottie closed her eyes and breathed slowly, as though gathering the strength to face a memory she never wanted to confront. When she opened them again, her voice was steady but heavy, like each word carried the weight of someone else's pain. "When I opened the trunk," she said softly, "I didn't see what I expected. There were no jewels, no letters, no belongings, only a shawl, torn, stained. And beneath it," she paused, swallowing hard, "a set of bangles, Shazia's bangles." Lila shivered. She remembered hearing stories that Shazia's favorite glass bangles used to jingle softly wherever she walked. But these were shattered, sharp, like broken promises. Some pieces were missing entirely. "That wasn't all," Dottie continued. "When I touched them, the well changed. It wasn't just darkness, it was memory, her memory." She described it slowly. The sudden vision, a young woman running, the sound of footsteps behind her, a cry choked by a hand over her mouth, a struggle in the courtyard, a fall, a blow, an accident that became a secret that became a curse. Lila gasped, covering her mouth. Who did this to her? Dottie's eyes dropped. "Someone from our own bloodline." Silence fell like a stone. The truth landed with a painful clarity. Shazia hadn't disappeared. She hadn't run away. She had died, and someone, in fear and shame, buried both her body and the evidence within the well. Her spirit lingered, not out of revenge, but because she was never acknowledged, never mourned, never given justice. Lila felt her chest tighten. And the man in the photograph, was he involved? Dottie's voice wavered. No, he tried to save her. He was the only one who knew what really happened. And when he tried to speak, the family silenced him. They sent him away, erased his name, buried his existence just like hers. Your grandmother kept that photograph so he would not be forgotten. The realization was staggering. Everything, the warnings, the silence, the locked drawer, the fear, had been a shield, a desperate attempt to keep Lila safe from a truth stained with old guilt. So, "Why now?" Lila whispered. "Why did Shazia reach out to us after all these years?" Dottie placed a trembling hand on hers. "Because you listened," she said. "Because you saw her. Because you weren't afraid of her voice." Lila looked at the trunk, small, fragile, yet carrying the weight of a soul trapped in silence. "What do we do now?" Dottie stood slowly, her back straighter than it had been in years. "For a long time, we set her free." They carried the trunk outside beneath the stars to the old neem tree where Shazia used to sing at dusk. Together, they dug a small space, not for a burial, but for remembrance, for truth, for peace. Dottie placed the shawl inside gently. Lila laid the broken bangles on top, and the wind, which had been restless all night, finally softened into a calm, warm breeze. As they covered the small memorial with soil, a faint sound drifted through the branches, a soft jingle, like bangles, whole again. Lila felt tears slip down her cheeks. She asked quietly, "She's gone?" "No," Dottie whispered. "She's free." The house behind them seemed to exhale, lighter, relieved. The air warmer. For the first time in decades, the past no longer haunted the living. It had spoken, and it had been heard. If you enjoyed this story, like the video and subscribe for more thrilling tales of family secrets, mysteries, and chilling discoveries. Comment below if you would have dared to open the drawer. If you found a photograph that your family never talked about, would you look at it or leave it untouched? Options for viewers and comments. I would open it. I would leave it alone. I'd investigate carefully.